only engage the questions and the arguments that are at hand. This is not a direct cross-examination where you guys are throwing questions at each other in that regard. So all I ask is that you guys continue to keep the same decorum and respect for each other so we can all engage and have a great time in this discussion. All right. With that said, David, and go ahead, AP. Look like you want to say something.
I want to quickly share my screen here to point something out as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, unfortunately, I've debated I debated Nader Ahmed, even that was better than this. This is just pure like barbarism in the name of.
Hey, AP. Hold on 1 second. Yes. Before you start that, let me get the timer and everything situated.
Okay.
And then you guys give me a couple seconds here, and then we'll get you going, man.
Okay.
Sorry, Marlon. Remind me of the timings here. Is it 5?
It'd be 4 minutes each.
We're going 4 back and forth.
Yeah, four back and forth for a total of 32 minutes. So, all right, AP, you got it for 4 minutes, man.
Okay, is it on the screen now? My screen sharing, I only see it as a small.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring it up, the bigger one. Okay. You can go ahead.
Okay, so obviously a lot of really, really bad stuff was said here, but I also want to share my screen here and show just one aspect here. We talked about Quran chapter 4 verse 157, and I briefly explained how the Quran clearly says that he was neither killed nor crucified, and we have then argued about something. Now I want to ask one simple question after I demonstrate what the Quran actually says. It says here, you can look at the Arabic, wama qatuluhu, they did not kill him, wama salabuhu, they did not crucify him. And then it was only made to appear so. It was only made to appear so does not mean that he was actually brought on the cross and it was only made to appear as if he died. Nobody understood this as so. This is an idea that Gnostics also believed, and they thought that somebody was actually crucified, but it wasn't Jesus. There are lots of interpretations you can make of this. However, I just want to point out something very funny and very silly here. So I pointed out that it says they did not kill him, and they did not crucify him. Our Ahmadi friend says that crucifying here, when it says they did not crucify him, means they did not kill him by crucifixion. Okay. Then why in the world does it say they did not kill him and they did not crucify him? This means that Allah is saying they did not kill him, nor did they kill him by crucifixion. Why is that what Allah would be saying? It seems like Allah has a very, very strange way of communicating, which is why it clearly says they did not kill him, nor did they crucify him, which is how it was understood throughout the Islamic history and Islamic scholarship. Secondly, accusing us of cherry picking things. Seriously, once again, Matthew 28, very, very clearly, even the Greek says he came back from the dead, from nekros in Greek. It's very clear there. He died and he came back. He rose.
And that's actually connected to the sign of Jonah. So once again, sign of Jonah, you read about Jesus saying it in Matthew 16, same exact chapter right after that. Jesus says that he's going up to Jerusalem, he's going to be killed. Peter says this will never happen to you. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. You don't have in mind the things of God, but the things of men. He rebukes Peter and calls him Satan specifically for saying that he wouldn't die. So that is the one interpretation that's completely ruled out, and it's the interpretation that our Muslim friends cling to. They say, but Jonah was alive. Not according to Jonah himself. What does Jonah say? He says, I called out to the Lord out of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly of Sheol I cried, and you heard my voice. Sheol, what is that? That's the abode of the dead. Later, as far as how he was alive again, verse 5, he says, the waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head at the roots of the mountains. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. And so they'll interpret Jonah as saying, yep, I was alive the entire time, even though he says he was in Sheol and that God raised him up from the pit that had closed upon him forever. And Jesus, who says that their interpretation, the Ahmadi and Muslim interpretation, is completely satanic, they say, nope, that's what Jesus is actually saying. He's saying that our interpretation is as good as gold. My goodness.
All right.
Yeah,
that was four, right, Marlon? Were we?
About 8
Well,
seconds left.
I also want to point out one thing, which is that the Hindu text was brought up. There is still no single evidence to give us that there was actually a first century record of this.
Yeah, I want to see the first century manuscript.
All right,
Can
Dr.
I?
Tahir.
Yeah, can I?
Yeah, Dr. Tahir and Umar, you guys are up for your 4 minutes.
Can I just jump in? I mean, I find it remarkable that David is quoting Jonah, but he for some reason stops before verse 7, which says, "As my life was ebbing away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you into your holy temple. Those who worship vain idols forsake their true loyalty." And he goes on to say, "Deliverance belongs to the Lord." So it's about as he is heading towards death, as my life was ebbing away, I remember the Lord who heard my prayer and brought me out. So yes, it's about when someone is dying or in the process of heading towards death, they are saved. That is the sign of Jonah. The idea that this is some kind of fringe interpretation is quite frankly clearly false. Relying on some incredibly minority position, which contradicts most significantly the words of Jonah itself, the book of Jonah. I think it should not be accepted in this situation. And I would like to emphasize and repeat again, if it was the case that Jesus did really to go around telling all of his disciples that I'm going to be killed and then I'm going to come back, why would they all flee? Why were they all shocked to see him again? That doesn't make sense. Why was he praying in the Garden of Gethsemane before? Why did he cry out, "My Lord, why have you forsaken me?" Why did these things happen? There is no explanation. We have presented a coherent narrative that makes sense of the bulk and the majority of the actual events, pre-crucifixion, peri-crucifixion, and post-crucifixion. You've done nothing to actually refute that except to rely on certain statements which are imputed to Jesus in the Bible, in the Gospels, which contradict other statements. So this is what we're saying. We're saying go and look at the actual overall narrative. Because if you don't do that, then you have to simply say this is some incoherent religious mumbo jumbo. Let's just ignore all of it. We don't want to do that. And we're giving the audience a methodology in order to save them from that fate, and to be able to understand Jesus as a true man. You have not been able to give any such methodology. All you're saying is that according to your methodology, the Gospels are basically incoherent. Nothing really makes sense. Then why believe? Well, perhaps it's the foolishness of man.
Yeah, which is the wisdom of God according to Paul, right? So absolutely right, Omar. So Jonah, the case of Jonah was what we call a near-death experience, and it's called near death. It's not called actual death. A lot of near-death experiences happen today. People see the tunnel, see the light, get the life review, and come back. It doesn't mean they actually died. This is a well-known phenomenon. You can go on nde.org, I think it is, got thousands of such near-death experiences, and you can read them for yourself. They're all living, by the way. They didn't all die and come back to life. As for the meaning of Salib, it's very sad that this individual, he doesn't seem to listen to what I'm actually saying. There were two theories of how Jesus died. And in fact, David Wood has already mentioned one of the theories, which is that he was stabbed with a spear. This is refuted in the words وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ, because qital means to be killed through a spear in particular, or through a sword, or through a sharp object, to be killed directly. Crucifixion, salabu, is in actual fact is the word, as I demonstrated from the other verse of the Quran relating to the interpretation of Joseph, is used to mean death. In and of itself, it means to die through the act of crucifixion. It's like if we say that such and such drowned. I don't need to say that such and such died through drowning. The word died is implicit in the term drowning. But in the same way, crucifixion can in Arabic also mean to be put on the cross, just as we use it in English. Or we can say he was crucified. It can mean he died through crucifixion. It can also mean he was put on the cross. We argue that in actual fact it means here that he was died through crucifixion. The reason we do so is because the Quran is refuting the allegation that he died. The Quran is not refuting the allegation that he was put on the cross. It says, we did kill the Messiah, son of Mary, messenger of Allah, but they did not slay him with a spear, nor did they kill him through crucifixion. It's refuting both aspects by which Jesus was thought to, in actual fact, have died. I want to put it to you, how do you explain the fact that he had a beating heart at the time of the supposed death?
All right, David Napi.
I just want to ask very quickly how silly it would be to say that somebody was actually electrocuted but didn't die, and we then said he was neither killed nor was he electrocuted. It's kind of funny. However, I also want to point out one thing, which is I want to bring up once again Matthew 28. Matthew 28 very, very clearly says that very clearly has people under the impression that Jesus actually died. He was actually killed, and he is being looked for. but he's no longer there because he has risen from the dead. This is not just an interpretation. It's not just the English translation. It's not something that we're making up. It is directly in the text. It is found in the Greek. He was dead. He rose from the dead and is going ahead of you into the Galilee. That is what it says. We have multiple accounts of the Gospels clearly laying out and clearly saying that he died and came back to life. Why did Jesus pray and ask for help? Why did Jesus pray that this cup is passed from him? Very, very simple. This is not something that is a great mystery that Christians have never answered. It's because of the nature of Jesus, which has been part of Christology from day one. I know this. Anyone who has read 5 minutes of Christology knows this. The explanations there are that it is Jesus's human experience with his human nature, his fully human and fully divine nature, or his fully human and divine nature, and so on. This is not a mystery. It has been around for 2,000 years. Go ahead, David.
On the sign of Jonah, they say that in verse 7 he said, "When my life was fading away, I remember the Lord." Yeah. Jonah runs. He ends up in the water. And when his life was fading away, he remembered the Lord. Right, that's true. But what does he say in verse 6? He says he died. So he remembers the Lord as he's dying. He says he was dead. Guys, you're at least acknowledging that there is an alternative interpretation, that there are people who take this literally. Okay, so at best then you would say it's ambiguous. There are people who have interpreted it both ways. Okay, if you have two interpretations, which one do you go with? Well, if you're saying that Jesus is claiming that he's going to be in the same situation Jonah is, Jesus called one interpretation satanic, demonic, straight from the pits of hell. How do you go with the interpretation that Jesus specifically identifies as directly from the pits of hell? On the issue as far as why would they cut someone that they thought was dead? Why would they stab him with a spear? That was you find this in other sources, where if they want to be sure someone's dead, they stab him with a sword or a spear. A death blow, if you had to take someone off a cross, was standard Roman practice to make sure. Why? These guys were in quite a bit of trouble along the lines of death penalties if you let a crucified victim down and you weren't supposed to. As far as the beating heart, why is it that every doctor I can find on this says the opposite of what you guys are saying? What they'll say is there are multiple things that could be happening, because it just says stabbed in the side. It doesn't say pierced in the side. It doesn't say exactly where they hit him. It just says side. But I'll just quote for here, the full quote from the ending of the Journal of the American Medical Association. It says, "It remains unsettled whether Jesus died of cardiac rupture or of cardiorespiratory failure. However, the important feature may not be how he died, but rather whether he died. Clearly, the weight of historical and medical evidence indicates that Jesus was dead before the wound to his side was inflicted, and supports the traditional view that the spear, thrust between his right ribs, probably perforated not only the right lung, but also the pericardium and heart, and thereby ensured his death."
Two questions.
Interpretations based on the assumption that Jesus did not die on the cross appear to be at odds with modern medical knowledge, and you guys are taking it as medically obvious that he was alive.
Still waiting for the Hindu text, by the way.
We'd like the evidence for the Hindu text.
All right, that's time. Dr. Tahir and Dr. Umar, you guys got it for 4 minutes.
Can I start again? Is that all right? Yeah, I'll do it quickly.
Sorry. No, go on, Umar. So Hindu text,
okay.
King Shalivana. King Shalivana is the person who met him in the Valley of Kashmir. King Shalivana was from the 1st century. As for the original 1st century text, I don't have the original Old Testament text from 1400 BC of Moses. So this is all a meaningless kind of stupid argument, frankly. So you're going to reject the whole of the Old Testament because the earliest exact copy we have is at the time of Jesus, which is 1400 years later. It's a nonsense argument. As for the actual issue with Jonah, again, I come back to this. You talk about the weeds were wrapping around his legs and all of that. And then what happened? He was swallowed by a whale, by a fish, right? And it says in Jonah 2:1, "Then Jonah prayed unto the Lord his God out of the fish's belly." You can't pray unless you're alive. So yes, he was close to death in the act of dying when he was in the sea, and God answered his prayer by having him swallowed by a whale. So that is in actual fact the narrative sequence of events. Omar, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'm really kind of shocked at David's argument there, to be honest. He's saying that verse 6 proves me wrong. I went down to the land whose bars closed upon me forever, yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God, as my life was ebbing away. Verse 6 is explained by verse 7, where he says, as my life was ebbing away. Your argument is that Jonah died, and then when dead, he prayed. It's fairly hard to pray when you're dead. Okay, it's not just a different phase of, I don't know, dream state. If death means anything.
He prayed in the belly of the whale, it says, and that he would have already survived from the water by being eaten by the whale.
There you go as well. So, I mean, this is not a valid interpretation of the sign of Jonah, and you're imputing this upon Jesus without evidence. And as we've said, yes, there are statements that Jesus said he would be killed, but then this clearly contradicts that, and he says it's going to be his only sign, and then when he actually goes for the crucifixion, everyone is shocked. He's praying. He's calling it a trial. He believes that God's forsaking him. Again, something you haven't addressed at all, while on the cross. And then he appears again, and everyone is incredibly shocked. And he says, I'm not a ghost. I'm hungry. Can you give me some fish? Does this strike you like someone who is A, divine, and B, has, he's proving that he is actually the same person. Now, I am again startled somewhat by Ridwan's argument that the reason that the way you can explain all of this is because of Jesus's human nature. So essentially, in order to explain the clear contradictions between modern day Christian belief and the events of the gospel, Ridwan has to then appeal to the hypostatic union of Christ and the dual divine human nature of God and man in order to explain it. This is like explaining a mystery by appealing to a riddle. This isn't an explanation. You can't appeal to something which is actually more confusing, more contentious to explain something which is, rather more straightforward. I mean, this is already assuming hugely Christian doctrine in order to do so, which rests upon the reality of the death and resurrection. So you're assuming the antecedent for the precedent, whatever that is.
Yeah, absolutely. They use the resurrection. They use the resurrection to support his godhood, and they use his godhood to support the resurrection. Is a completely circular argument. I want to highlight that you haven't really answered the question of how a beating heart is still present when he's already dead. You admitted that they thought that he was dead. I didn't ask you necessarily why they cut his spear, why they cut him. We believe he said they did so to check whether he was alive, but you didn't explain how a heart is beating. How did it come out under pressure? Explain this to us. You don't need to be a doctor to figure this one out, buddy. It's pretty straightforward, actually. Everybody knows a heart is beating is.
We're finished.
All right, that's time right there. Thank you guys. All right, David and AP, you guys are back in the seat for your third 4-minute segment.
So we have just seen it. I asked for the supposed evidence that there was a Hindu record of Jesus appearing in India. We have asked very, very clearly where the evidence is that there was indeed such a record from the 1st century or whatever it is, because the record that we have is actually from the 18th century or the 19th century. And the response that I have received from Tahir here is that he doesn't have it, because he also doesn't have to have records of the Old Testament. Very, very fantastic. I'm not surprised, considering that our friends not only believe in Muhammad, who came 6 centuries later and said, actually, what Jesus said was this and this and this. They also hold on to the insane person who came later on in the 19th century and made claims about what people actually said 2,000 years ago. And we are supposed to just blindly trust him. Very, very funny.
AP, let me just add on to that. So he's comparing this Hindu source, where our earliest record of it is the 18th century, when the Hindus were dealing with missionaries, and missionaries were talking about Jesus, and then this ends up in their text. If you look at descriptions, they describe this text as a living text because people kept adding to it over time. What's the difference between that and the Old Testament? Well, we have quotations of the Old Testament all over the place. Yes. People are giving commentaries on the Old Testament. They're discussing it. They're quoting it. No one is aware of this source about Jesus being an idiot until the 18th century. And we're supposed to believe that it was there all along and no one ever heard of it. Very, 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 very strange.
David, I wanted to ask a few questions, and then you can go ahead and take it from there. So, once again, we pointed out Jesus' human nature, his human experience. It's very obvious in Christian thinking and Christian belief why Jesus comes and has a human experience and a divine presence, and it is for the sins of man and his death and resurrection for the atonement and so on. I brought this up because our Ahmadi opponents made it look like there is no explanation at all as to why Jesus said, Father, or God, why have you forsaken me? This is actually a quote from Psalm 22 and directly makes a biblical reference where the psalmist doesn't actually believe that God abandoned them. It makes a point, and Jesus does the same thing in his human nature, in his human form, where he also suffers for mankind and is then risen again. David, very quickly, and then you can take it from here. I still expect the response to Matthew 28, which clearly says that he died and rose from the dead. Second, also, our opponent said that in Acts we can find that there are these Asian Christians who didn't hold any of these heretical beliefs. Where in the world is that? We find Christians from different places. We don't find anywhere that there were these that there were these other righteous Christians who had these other beliefs, not the Trinitarian beliefs. This is completely made up. Plus, our Ahmadi friends sound like atheists when they doubt that a dead person or a person whose soul has been taken cannot pray. David, go ahead.
Yeah. So on the issue of my God, why have you forsaken me? Yeah, that's the difference between Muslims today and first century Jews. First century Jews heard the Psalms regularly. They would know that what Jesus was claiming. They're confused by Jesus saying that he isn't a ghost, and they think that he's showing that he had just survived. He's showing that he isn't a ghost because that's what they would have. That's what you would conclude if you knew someone is dead. They're not like our Ahmadi friends who think, oh, crucifixion, just pack some spices on there and you'll be fine and you'll be great afterwards. They understood the practice. They had seen it with their own eyes. They know that he was dead. If they saw him alive again, they would conclude that he's a ghost. He proves that he's not a ghost. He proves that he has risen from the dead. And again, this works against you. This works against you because the disciples had no concept of a Messiah who's going to die and so on. That didn't make sense to them. That's why they didn't understand it. That's why they fled. What was their ultimate takeaway? They went to their bloody deaths claiming that Jesus had risen from the dead and appeared to them, that he died on the cross for sins. Something big had to happen to convince these men, they did become convinced. Your explanation doesn't account for that.
All right, that's time. All right, Dr. Umar and Dr. Tayyar, you got to back up for 4 minutes.
Omar, do you mind if I go first, or do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think I'll start. The reality is they're focusing on a fringe argument that we made relating to Hindu scriptures because they can't actually address the fundamental arguments that we made relating to the Christian text, and that's why they're emphasizing it. And you're absolutely right. It was given as a kind of end thing to prompt people to read into a little bit more about the life of Jesus in India, but there's actually very good books like the Fida Hasnain book. Obviously, you have to start with Jesus in India, written by Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, which lays out the evidence of Jesus in Hindu texts and Buddhist texts, and also in other places in India. But the key evidence that Jesus was there in India and that he'd migrated to search the lost tribes of Israel over Nepal, Afghanistan, Kashmir, Tibet, and Pakistan and India is the fact that his tomb is there, is the fact that you can go to Jesus' tomb today and you can go and visit his tomb in Kashmir, in Srinagar, which means, in Srinagar, interestingly, actually means the site of the skull. So the place of his death, his actual death, was named after the place of his crucifixion, Golgotha, which also meant the site of the skull. As for Matthew 28, you're absolutely right. It says that he was risen. And that is entirely, it says, and go quickly, the angel says, and go quickly and tell his disciples that he's risen from the dead. This is absolutely correct. And this is in actual fact precisely what we believe, but it's an idiomatic statement. If you say that he's come from the dead, it can quite easily mean that he's come from the place of the dead, that he's risen from the place of the dead. He was buried he was put in a tomb, in a sepulchre where the rich people were laid out, and that could easily be described as coming from the dead. This is an idiomatic form of speech. It's just shocking that you think that idiom is not a part of normal religious literature when you're all at the same time talking about.
In fact, can I interrupt for one sentence here? And say this was even recorded in the Synoptics when the angels appear and they say, why are you looking for the living among the dead? So he's saying that actually this is the place of the dead.
Exactly.
No, carry on, sorry.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you for that. So Matthew 28 doesn't actually prove anything. In all the places he says that I will be risen from the dead, This is the true meaning of it. If indeed he said it, it means to be raised from the place of the dead. The fact that he didn't himself understand what would happen was evidenced by the fact that he prayed for the whole night for him not to die. And then as he thinks he's dying, he's saying, God, why have you forsaken me? Presumably because it's not going according to how he thought it would go. As for the question of why wasn't there, where are these other righteous Christians? I already showed you that the other righteous Christian was James the Just. James the Just was the leader of the early Christian community, the early Ebionite community, and he accuses Paul in Acts 21:21 of, in actual fact, forsaking the law of Moses, teaching all men everywhere against Moses and against the law and against our customs. The Jews who have believed from Asia will surely hear that you have come. And then he asks him to do the public Nazarite purification rituals. I don't understand what part of my words you don't understand. It's written in black and white. Go read Acts 21. Okay, he says it clearly. So the people who did not believe in the resurrection were all the other followers of Jesus, especially the Jews. And Paul himself, you mentioned earlier that Paul didn't, he never said that he didn't behave as a non-Jew. That's absolutely false. Paul in 1 Corinthians 19:21, he himself explicitly states that the law is not actually applicable upon him, and he was born a Jew, and he was in actual fact previously a Pharisee. So your argument that Paul preached to the Gentiles as a Gentile and then to the Jews as a Jew, no. He states in 1 Corinthians 19:21, he states very clearly that the law is not applicable. Though the law is not applicable upon me, that's exactly what he says. So you completely are wrong on that point. Have we not answered anything else? Finally, ghosts. Sorry, Omar, did you want to say anything? I want to say something about this ghost business. You've just proven my point. A ghost is a body after death. That's what a ghost is by definition. When he says I'm not a ghost, and then he proves his living by eating with them and expressing his human needs, it's a self-evident that he's saying that I'm a human body. I'm really sorry to take up all the time, sorry.
All right, David and AP, you guys are up for your final 4-minute crossfire.
AP, let me respond quickly to that last point he made, expressing human needs by taking fish. Why does the text say he was taking he was eating? To show them that he's not a ghost. He's showing them that he is resurrected. They conclude, they just said that a ghost is what is a person who is risen from the dead. That's false according to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Resurrection is not disembodied existence. Resurrection is God uniting your soul with your body in a glorified state. Again, this hurts you. It hurts you that the disciples ultimately concluded that Jesus had risen from the dead. It's made no sense to them, and that's what they believed. Something big had to happen. If you think that Jesus eating fish means that he hadn't been resurrected, you didn't just attack Judaism and Christianity, you just attacked Islam. The Quran says over and over again, it talks about the fruits and the drinks that you'll be having in Jannah. Muhammad talked about these, talked about deflowering virgins and the great things you get to eat. And he even said what the first meal of the people of paradise after the resurrection is going to be. It's going to be the lobe of fish liver. So if you're saying that a resurrected person cannot eat, it makes no sense. You'd have to be a ghost or something like that. You just attacked Jesus. You attacked Muhammad. You attacked the Quran. You attacked all of it, all to defend Mirza Ghulam Ahmed.
I want to encourage everyone to pick up the book of Acts and look at it. Acts 21 is completely taken out of context. I will go as far as to say that our friends here are lying, because Acts 21 does not say anything at all about Christians or Jews in Asia not believing in these heretical ideas that Paul presented. The whole topic is about whether Jews or Christian Jews are to follow the law in terms of circumcision and kosher food or not. That's the entirety of the context. The law as laid out in the Jewish beliefs, the commandments of God, which are known as over 600 commandments altogether found in the Torah. The dispute is about whether Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians are to follow the law or not. It says nothing at all about Jesus' death and resurrection, there is no dispute about it, because you will find again and again, as much as our friend might make it look like it's just idiomatic in Matthew 28, it's not. It's very clearly all over the Gospels. Jesus dies, is very clearly confirmed as dead, and is then risen from the dead. It doesn't. It's not idiomatic when it says risen from the dead. He dies,
And
he's buried, and he rises from the dead. He comes back alive.
Along with that, AP, on the point about the Apostle Paul and them saying Paul repented, well, you of course have Paul preaching Jesus' death and resurrection before that, but after that, Acts 26, Paul says, same context, now he's before King Agrippa, he says, to this day I have had the help that comes from God, and so I stand here testifying both to small and great, saying nothing but what the prophets and Moses said would come to pass, that the Christ must suffer, and that by being the first to rise from the dead, he would proclaim light both to our people and to the Gentiles. If that's a guy who repented of his belief in Jesus' death and resurrection, he has a very strange way of showing it.
Yep. And once again,
do we have more time, Marlon?
I would say don't cherry pick the Bible. Don't cherry pick the Bible. Either you take it or you leave it aside. If you take it, then take it as it is, and also talk about why Jesus is the only person to be born with a mother but no father.
All right. All right, that expires the time right there. Thank you guys for, I think Umar and Tahir got one more 4 minutes, right? All right, you guys got it for 4 minutes.
Okay, so a few quick things. So firstly, Jesus wasn't the only person to be born of a virgin. It also says in the Quran that Adam was as well. That's number one. Number two, eating. The Quran makes it very clear. No, it's true. The Quran makes it clear. It says in the Holy Quran that the case of Adam is the case of Jesus. Allah says to him, be and he was. So your whole point is irrelevant. The purpose for him being born of a virgin was to show that none among the Jews was worthy of being the father of the Messiah, because prophethood was to be transferred from the house of Ishmael, house of Jacob, to the house of Isaac, to the house of Ishmael. As for the issue of eating, the Quran again makes it very clear that the paradise is such that no eye has heard, nor any ear. The Prophet Muhammad made clear, no eye has seen, nor has any ear heard, nor has any mind conceived of what is the nature of paradise. So the nature of the food is absolutely not, is absolutely different. And obviously expressing physical needs and consuming that in this life indicates you have an ongoing physical body, which can't be glorified if you're going to have to depend upon ordinary human stuff. It's completely meaningless. The Acts 21, I would like to quickly share my screen again. So I can't share it, it seems. But I want to read to you, first of all, I got the reference slightly wrong. It's 1 Corinthians 9:19 through to 21. Paul particularly says that he says that the gospel, that the law of Christ is, I may have to check this, but I think I may have got the wrong reference again, but I'll find it out and I'll mention it later as well. He says, yes, here it is. Yes, exactly. Verse 21, 1 Corinthians 9:21. So he says, very clear, to them that are without law, as without law, being not without law to God, but under the law to Christ. So he says that he's not under God's law, but under the law to Christ. In Acts 21, again, you're just completely misrepresenting the reality. Paul's arrival at Jerusalem, Acts 21:20, he says, when they heard this, they praised God. Then they said to Paul, you see, brother, how many thousands of Jews have believed, and all of them are zealous for the law. Now, if they're zealous for the law, then why didn't they accept Paul's atoning sacrifice doctrines? And he says here, they have been informed that you teach all the Jews who live among the Gentiles to turn away from Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or live according to their customs. So this idea that there isn't some rift is completely nonsense, and it is about atonement. It's about the relevance of atonement to turning away the need for the law of Moses. Omar?
Oh, I didn't know you were coming with me. Did I have anything? Yeah, David, you keep on talking about how something big happened. In your belief, nothing really happened because God apparently demonstrated his omnipotence in a slightly incoherent, confusing way. But ultimately, you believe that Jesus told all of his disciples, by the way, guys, I'm going to be killed, and then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to come back, and it's going to be fine, we're all going to be good. Okay, we're all very confused how all the events of the crucifixion line up with those statements, but that's your belief. So if he comes back afterwards and he's done that, nothing big happened. What actually happened in your view? It went exactly as it was supposed to have done. So they shouldn't have been shocked. They shouldn't have been surprised. They should have said, yeah, that's what I expected, just what we planned for this Sunday, and hopefully this will be commemorated forevermore. This was regular and ordinary according to the knowledge that they already had. What the Gospels actually document is that they are shocked. Now, why are they shocked? Because they didn't think that he would survive. They thought he died. If they thought that he was supposed to survive, why would they be shocked that he's come back? In fact, this was the actual sign. This was the big thing that happened. That Jesus, when he looked like he would die, when he said nothing, he was in his defense, is absolutely heroic. He's before Pilate and they accuse him of things and Caiaphas, and he just says nothing. He relies on God and he was vindicated. And that was the sign of his truth. That was the big thing which proves that Jesus is true. If you don't accept that, then actually you have no real reason to believe that he was a holy and true man.
All right. Thank you guys so much for that crossfire. Very engaging. Very, very, very good. Very good. Appreciate you guys so much for your time. And so now we're going to transition to the closing remarks, which will be 5-minute closings. And then after that, we'll have a Q&A. So audience, get your questions in. Some of you guys, man, some of the questions, then you guys put them at super chats too. Some of y'all know y'all wrong. But nonetheless, 5-minute closing, guys. And then we'll jump into the Q&A. So get your questions in, audience. So we got a fantastic Q&A. That said, David and AP, you guys are up for your